Okay, we'll dive in. Consumer and producer. Consumption taxes are levied on goods and services at the point of sale, typically as a percentage of the purchase price. These taxes are a common way for governments to raise revenue and regulate consumption patterns. However, the imposition of consumption taxes has wider implications beyond just collecting revenue. It affects the behavior of consumers and producers in the market, ultimately influencing the welfare. When a consumption tax is introduced, it alters the incentive for both consumers and producers. Consumers are faced with a higher price for the tax goods, leading to a reduction in the purchasing power and potentially changing their consumption habits. On the other hand, producers experience an increase in the cost of production, which can impact the profitability and production decisions. Understanding how consumption taxes impact consumer and producer welfare requires an analysis of the changes in consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the presence of deadweight loss in the market. By examining these factors, we can gain insight into distribution of the tax burden between consumers and producers, as well as the overall efficiency of the market in the presence of tax. Impact of consumer surplus. The imposition of a consumption tax shifts the supply curve upwards, leading to an increase in the price paid by consumers. As a result, consumer surplus decreases as consumers have to pay a higher price for the same quantity of goods. The new equilibrium price is higher than before the tax was imposed, leading to a loss in consumer surplus. The impact on the producer surplus. For producers, the price they receive for the goods increased due to the tax. This leads to an increase in producer surplus as producers now receive a higher price for the goods. However, not all of the tax burden is borne by producers. Some is passed on to consumers. Deadweight loss. The deadweight loss represents the efficiency that arises in the market due to the tax. It is the loss of total surplus that occurs when the quantity of goods bought and sold is no longer at the market equilibrium. In this case of consumption tax, deadweight loss occurs because some transactions that were mutually beneficial to both buyers and sellers no longer occur due to the tax burden. This loss of potential gains from trade leads to a reduction in overall economic welfare. So here I'm illustrating the effects of tariffs that are used in a demand and supply diagram. To understand better the tariffs used in a demand and supply diagram. When a tax, such as a tariff, is imposed on imports, it changes the dynamics of the market for imported goods. In a demand and supply diagram, a tariff will shift the supply curve upwards, leading to a rise in the price of imported goods. Consumers end up paying a higher price, which reduces the quantity demanded. Domestic producers benefit from the higher price and may increase production. The difference between the deadweight loss from a consumption tax and an import tariff lies in the market scope. Import tariffs disrupt international trade dynamics, affecting both domestic and foreign producers, whereas consumption taxes primarily impact domestic transactions. A different explanation of tariffs is that a tariff is a tax imposed on imported goods, aimed at making them more expensive relative to domestic products. This policy tool is often used to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. So as you can see on my diagram, we have the legend on the right hand side, which will show you what each of those initials and letters stand for. You can see on the left hand side the price, so the price of an import product. On top, you got the world price without trade, the middle world price plus a tariff, so plus a tax, and then underneath that, you got the price, so the world price with no tax involved. Those two small yellow triangles, they are the deadweight loss. The rectangle in the middle is the tax revenue. Now the green is the consumer surplus from imports. The blue on the left hand side, consumer surplus from tariff. Here we're going to dive into generative AI and inequality in the labor market. So we're going to give two scenarios. Scenario one will be generative AI reduces inequality. Mechanisms. AI automates routine tasks, allowing workers to focus on more complex, higher value activities. Enhanced productivity leads to higher wages and job opportunities. Now on the diagram, Supply curve represents labor supply. Demand curve, D1, D2, shift rightward to indicate increased demand for skilled labor due to AI integration. Increased demand for skilled labor, shift from D1 to D2, raises wages and reduces inequality. On a second scenario, generative AI increases inequality. AI disproportionately benefits high-skilled workers, widening the wage gap between high and low-skilled workers. On the diagram, supply curve represents labor supply, demand curve, D1 for low-skilled, D2 for high-skilled. Increased demand for high-skilled, unchanged for low-skilled. Generative AI and productivity in the economy. Generative AI's impact on productivity can be positive or neutral, depending on how it is implemented. In a scenario where generative AI boosts productivity, tasks become more efficient, leading to increased output and economic growth. If generative AI leaves productivity largely unchanged, the technology may not significantly impact output, but other factors like resource allocation and innovation could influence economic performance. Aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagrams can visually depict how generative AI influences overall output levels in the economy under different scenarios. In scenario 1, AI boosts productivity. AI enhances efficiency, reducing cost and increasing output. AS1 to AS2, rightward shift indicates increased productivity. AI shifts AS right from AS1 to AS2, lowering prices and increasing output. On a scenario 2, AI leaves productivity unchanged. AI adoption faces challenges, resulting in no significant productivity gains. Aggregate supply curve AS remains unchanged. AS remains in the same, indicating no significant change in productivity or output. Below, I'm showing a DAGs, imperial analysis for a fat tax using directed acyclic graph. A directed acyclic graph is a visual representation of the causal relationship between variables. DAG components are nodes, edges. Nodes represent variables, example fat tax, health outcomes, economic growth. Edges represent causal relationships, example fat tax to health outcomes. Now the steps that you would normally take to assess the impact of fat tax are: identify variables. In this scenario, fat tax, independent variable, health outcomes, intermediate variables, economic growth, dependent variables. Then you will construct your DAG. Direct edges from a fat tax to health outcomes and economic growth. Possible confounders, socioeconomic status, with edges to all primary variables. You would use model specifications using regression analysis to estimate the effect of tax on health outcomes. Assess indirect effects of economic growth through improved health. Direct acyclic graphs can help model the complex relationships between implementing a fat tax and health outcomes in an economic growth. Through an empirical economic model, researchers can assess how a fat tax influences consumer behavior, health outcomes related to obesity, healthcare costs, and overall economic activity. By analyzing the interconnected variables in DAG framework, economists can determine the potential impact of fat tax on both public health and economic indicators. Thank you for listening.